Hi, I'm Jordan Wilson. Today I'm with Robin Koroluk, and we're here to discuss Diversity Matters. This will be a follow-on session to our much larger formal presentation on CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, but also Careers for All. Today Robin and I will talk about diversity and women in finance. My own story, in brief, is that I come from a public accounting background where there's lots of women that work. I've worked in the fiduciary industry overseas, again, much representation with females. And I have a lot of cultural diversity, having lived in the Caribbean and in Switzerland, and having managed trust companies in Singapore, in the United Kingdom, as well as the Caribbean. So I think I bring a little bit on the diversity matters that might bring some interest and some education. I'll turn it over to Robin now, and she can give a quick update on her.
Very impressive, Jordan. Hi everyone, my name is Robin Koroluk. I'm a portfolio manager and senior wealth advisor with 𝐒𝐄𝐲 Wealth Management. I obtained my Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Saskatchewan in 2010 and CFA Charter in 2017. I, of course, am a female in the finance industry, so I think today will be a good opportunity to have a discussion about why diversity matters and first-hand experiences that I've had. So Jordan, why don't you kick it off here?
Okay, the first question to Robin this time will be, as a female, and you talked in your formal presentation that women are underrepresented in finance. So not a lot of women on a relative basis pursue finance careers.
Right.
Being a woman yourself, what led you to become a finance major at university and then pursue a career now with 𝐄𝐻𝐒 as a wealth manager?
Right. I think every person is gonna select whatever they enjoy doing. So at the end of the day, finance and numbers has always been something I've enjoyed, I've had an interest in. To be honest and blunt, and I know we've chatted about this once before, I actually didn't realize how underrepresented the finance industry was for women. So to be honest, it wasn't something that crossed my mind before entering the industry. With that being said, it really has opened my eyes, as I have been in the industry now for about 10, 11 years now. It's really crazy to see the underrepresentation, especially more in leadership roles and those higher up positions, because it seems some women start in their career but don't really advance as much as their male counterparts.
Now, just to follow up on that, you mentioned that you entered finance because in part you enjoyed math and calculations and stuff. One of the things that we have discussed, and we touched on that in our formal presentation, is the reality of the CFA designation and careers is that the number crunching is probably, for a wealth manager like you, a relatively small or smaller than anticipated amount of time that you spend on clients and your work. So what else, now that you are a wealth advisor, what do you do? Is it number crunching, or as we've discussed, is it hand holding? Is it educating clients?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because really a large part of my day is going to entail just building trust with clients, having that connection, being able to relate on those financial matters that matter to the client, and truly, whether you're a man or a woman, I think you can relate to a client, but females do have a different perspective that they bring with them, which makes me want other women to really understand that there is a spot for you in this industry because of that. But I do know a large reason more men succeed in this business is due to the drive potentially to bring in more assets, the sales side of it, whereas females tend to be a little more on the softer side, which I think doesn't get portrayed enough.
Okay. The reason I sort of raise that question is that's one of the things I think we do a poor job as chartered financial analysts, is the marketing of the designation itself, is that a lot of people enter expecting that we're going to be number crunchers and need strong math and strong financial calculation and analytical skills. Yet the reality is that's not quite the case in many career paths for CFAs. It's a lot of the softer skills that'll help you out to advance.
Well, I'm sure you've seen that in many of your career journeys, right? You know, being in higher executive type positions, you're probably dealing with a lot more people management than calculating a certain ROI, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and in fact, I think that there's a direct correlation, probably a negative correlation to throw in a financial term, between when you start your career path after coming out of university, say, yes, you probably will be doing some number crunching. It's the same as if you're an accountant as well. You have to do cash reconciliations, accounts receivable, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the same in finance. Your junior staff where you work probably are the ones that are looking through and analyzing the data. And as you advance, say as a wealth advisor, you become more of a rainmaker, to use a legal term, where you're bringing in the business, and so you're the one that has to have the interpersonal skills, the nuances to attract business and be seen as worthy of a client coming in. So as you advance, yes, it's the softer skills. If I was in Switzerland still, it's probably more important that I can talk about wine, the difference between Italian Tuscan wines and Spanish Riberas or Riojas. That's what clients are probably interested in talking about. Travel, as you and I have discussed, travel is a big thing for me. So those are the skill sets to have a discussion with someone on the Museo del Prado in Madrid. In Saskatchewan, maybe it's the Rough Riders. You have to have those interpersonal skills more so than being able to discuss modified durations with clients.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, that's just, I think, one of the things I always try to press with people is that if you do like crunching numbers, there are jobs in finance for that.
Right.
But there's a whole lot more that's out there, and it's just that a lot of people think that it is just number crunching, and it's not.
That's right, yeah. So as you're talking about all your various roles, you know, in different countries throughout the world, I'm always curious and interested to hear your stories and your interactions with, you know, your staff in general, but the females that you've dealt with throughout, like what type of roles have they held? How have they interacted with the rest? Have they fit in? Was there certain cultures they were more dominant?
Well, that's a tough one for me because I think we'll probably circle back to this in a couple other questions, but my experience is total diversity. I think that in the Caribbean, with the trust companies and banking, you have way more females in the locals, local staff, than men. It just, I hired, for one project, probably ended up hiring about 25 people in Nassau for a job. I think I hired 3 men, and I ended up getting rid of one of them. The trust company there in Nassau at the time probably was about 85% female.
So why do you think that is?
I think there's a few reasons, but I think that In the Caribbean, the women tend to be quite independent. Not that they're not married and stuff, but they tend to be a little bit more serious about pursuing careers as youth, and it just sort of trickles up. And I mean, I've been asked this question by a few people over the years, but if I was starting a trust company, of the 4 people that I would bring in initially, 3 of them would be women from the Caribbean. And that may be a little bit different than the stereotype, but these are strong quality staff. So
they're the right person. They're
yeah,
not
and so
dependent on their gender. You're just hiring them based on the right fit.
yeah, and so that's kind of why at times the diversity thing drives me a little bit batty, because in Nassau, if I was trying to say, well, you know, gee, I'm hiring 24 people, I better make sure I find 12 guys.
Right.
Well, the 12 guys wouldn't have been the same quality and the same drive and the same commitment as the people I ended up hiring.
Right.
So it's like, why would I hire, you know, just to hire men?
That's right.
Now, yes, there are some cultures where I would say
Maybe an equal opportunity isn't given.
yeah, and I think that's cultural. And I was reading, I mean, in Asia, for example, I think at times there is a perception that women can be a little bit more, not sure what the right word is, less assertive. Like you had talked about, maybe not the drive to go out and sell. Yet at the same time, when I was with UBS, the 2 top people in the entire Asia management group were women. Kathy Shi ran that organization, and I've had the privilege to talk with her personally 3 times when I was with UBS. Incredibly strong, incredibly bright woman. And I think she said, I saw a article with her, an interview recently with her, and she said the biggest challenge for her was, yes, women are sort of seen in that quieter, less assertive, I think was her term, personalities. So maybe you have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. The other thing that she said was problematic for her was that she had 2 children. And so, whereas say a single guy or a guy that's wife is home taking care of the kids can stay out and do the networking and the socializing and the building of the contacts, which is important. She could go out for one drink and then go home to her family. So in that case, maybe culturally, she had to step back, yet at the same time, the 2 top people with UBS in Asia were women.
Right.
And incredibly competent women at that. I mean, that's a woman that you would be happy to work for because just so strong.
Right.
So it's not like you're saying, okay, she's running it and her deputy's a woman. Now we better get rid of her deputy and get a guy. Like, again, it doesn't make sense to me. So incredibly strong.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good and topical conversation about can you have a family and be in a time demanding finance job, whether it be an executive position or really any type of leadership position. But my perspective would be that, that person that needs to go home to their family, maybe your argument can be your time is more valuable, therefore you make the most of that hour you have with that client rather than spending maybe that 5 hours that your male counterpart potentially could have from a time perspective. What do you think?
I never know whether to say no, you can't have a career if you want a family, or yes, you can. So I sort of go back and forth on that. I think the reality is that companies want people that can work. In my case, when I was in Switzerland, I was single, and so there's a problem in Singapore. Fly out tomorrow. you need to do something in Nassau or Cayman, fly out 2 days hence. Now, if I had a family, as some of my colleagues did, they're not in a position where they can just drop everything and do that. And so then opportunities come more to the single guy or the single woman that can drop everything and do it. And that's how you get promoted. You're seen as the reliable person, the go-to person. So in that sense, it's tough to have a family. Now in places like Switzerland, it's still it's changing, but it was still kind of the traditional family from the 1950s where the family unit was single income. And that was reflected in the pay scale. It was much better pay, so you could afford to have one person working. But again, that's the reality. Now, the world has changed globally, so that's changing. When I was in public accounting, you could sort of go accountant, chartered accountant, assistant manager, manager, senior manager, partner. You were either up or out. And a lot of women, same with law, a lot of women weren't prepared to put in that extra time because it is a lot of time and effort. They want the family life to some extent. So they ended up leaving the workforce in law and accounting. But what businesses found over the last, say, decade is now you're seeing these auxiliary positions like director or principal. And they're starting to pop up where, okay, you're not going to make partner, but there is this offshoot where you can still provide us with great value because you're a strong employee, but the need to put in a 100-hour work week isn't there. So companies are saying, yes, we want to keep these people because before it was all or nothing, either stay and do all the work or you're gone.
Right.
And that's just silliness.
Well, and I think even this generation is maybe a little different too, because I think whether you want to call it millennials or whatever generation it really is, but they're valuing the work-life balance a little more, so it's maybe not as focused on the gender, rather the age group.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, because what studies have found is that more and more men are taking advantage of these offshoot roles so they can still have careers in public accounting or law practices, and they're happy to work their 50 to 60, 70-hour weeks, and they don't have to be on the phone, ready to come in the office at 3 a.m. to close a deal. There is that quality of life trade-off, and they're willing to take 80% in compensation in order to juggle that. So you are seeing that more with men as well. But the other side too, which to factor in, is that, again, demographics are that women, we're seeing a lot less children for women or families. So a lot of couples are deciding not to have kids, and so they can both work. And again, when I was in Switzerland, it was still more of the days of 2.4 kids and the wife stayed home.
Right.
And that's changing. It's changed definitely in North America.
Right. So one thing we did talk about was the accounting and legal career path, how it's very defined. There's kind of a layout of what you could see yourself being at a certain effort level. I do agree that I think women do like to have that structure and to have that path, and to be honest, I feel like that's the reason why some females choose a career path than say accounting versus finance. But there's got to be more to it, because finance and accounting, there's so much overlap.
Oh, I completely agree, and we've discussed this a fair bit.
Yeah.
To take sort of a half step back, that's one of the things that I can never understand about why there is that underrepresentation of women in finance, is that in your formal presentation, Robin, you talked about how only 18% of investment management professionals are women in presumably North America.
Right.
You talked about how, you know, there's only, I think, 24% of Canadian CFAs are women.
Right.
So I'm not saying it has to be 50-50, but it's not a lot. And then when I personally compare it to my own life, when I articled, I felt, you know, I didn't count to the person, but I felt it was about 50-50, maybe even slightly more with women in my articling class when I was at Pricewaterhouse. And if I look at the statistics, I see that globally, per PricewaterhouseCoopers diversity report, is that women are sort of 50 to 53% over the last few years as far as college hires and new female associates, so people that are actually articling students or working in a public accounting firm. So it's slightly more than 50%, and that's my experience in public accounting.
Right.
Now, if I look at law, I see sort of, not quite the same, but if I look at statistics, in 2016, in Canada, it was 45% women were lawyers. In Europe, there's more women law graduates than there are men. In the UK in 2017, 48% of all lawyers are women. So what we see is that it's roughly the same. You know, it's almost 50-50, like lawyers and accountants versus, you know, are the same, and then you compare them to finance, and suddenly it's like half that. And so to me, that's again part of the marketing effort, is the fact that why, you know, the skill sets and the attitude and the temperament of becoming a lawyer or becoming a public accountant are similar in large part to becoming a finance professional. So why are women not going that route? And as you just talked about, one of the hypotheses that we have is that it's that lack of career definition. I come out of university as an accounting major, and it's changed slightly in Canada now with the aggregation, but it used to be you'd come out, you'd go work for Ernst & Young, KPMG, PwC now. Article, get your letters, go work in a controller position or go work for a company as an accountant. Your next 10 years after coming out of college were defined. It's not that way in finance. And so...
But I do think you can be as successful or even more successful in finance. And maybe, it doesn't take that clear path, but, you know, I think at the end of the day, if you had a role model that you could look up to that was in finance and say your family or your close group of friends, I think that would help maybe clear that path for some that have seen the success story and maybe make it a little less scary if our hypothesis is correct.
It has to be. Yeah, but I think that, I mean, part of the onus is on the companies to, if in fact women or men prefer some clarity as to their career progression, then it's up to the companies to better define what the career paths are. Again, in the trust world, you go get your TEP, your Trust and Estate Practitioner designation, you work for a trust company, you become a trust administrator, trust officer, trust manager. Your career is defined. You don't see that in finance. Now, it should, because one of the other things you talked about in your formal presentation was the simple fact that women often prefer to work with women as clients. And from a demographics, more and more women control more and more of the assets and the investment decisions in families. they live longer. There's all these reasons why if I'm 𝐒𝐄𝐒𝐲 or I'm BMO, I want to have women out there working with women clients.
Mm-hmm.
So if in fact that lack of clarity in a career path, then if I'm TD and I grant that clarity, maybe I'm going to attract better quality female
Absolutely.
staff.
And I think we're moving in the right direction. I think it's just going to take time to move that needle. That's great.
Trying to think here, what else do we got? So one of the things you talked about a bit in your formal presentation was just follow on to what we just discussed, is there is that recognition by companies and by the CFA Institute
Mm-hmm.
of the importance of attracting more women and more quality women into the profession. So maybe you can talk about a few things in your presentation, the scholarships, those sort of things that you talked about, the diversity initiatives, to try to attract more females into the profession.
Yeah, ultimately, the companies and particularly even the CFA Institute has really started to understand that this is something that's lacking, and although no one's able to really put their finger on what the issue is, although we have reasons, we know what needs to be done to move the needle. So really it's coming down to just having initiatives as firms, as the program. So the CFA program actually has a women scholarship that they do, and they are essentially only allowing females to apply for the scholarship. So your opportunity to obtain it is better odds. There actually is quite a few candidates that have signed up for the CFA, so we're at 40% in Canada. CFA charter holders are around 20% females in Canada, so we still have a ways to go, but again, when you're trying to move the needle on a much greater number, it's going to take some time. So lots of great initiatives, though. And companies are, particularly where I work, I'm seeing it a lot more, that they're trying to change that. And really, I just hope the right person gets into those roles rather than the gender.
And I think that even though it's only 24-25% of women in Canada are CFAs, that's more a reflection of the history. And when old males like myself die off, then you see the balance changing. And so it's gratifying that we're seeing 40% currently women entering the program.
Right.
And it's just a question for them to continue on that path and to have opportunities. Because again, I'm more like Robin. I think that you want to hire the best person for the team, and the best person may or may not be female, but you want to give them the opportunity to have and to attract. And I do think in many cases, the demographics of women wanting women advisors, that actually leads to a lot of opportunity. If you're young and thinking of entering a finance career, there probably will be lots of opportunities, and you'll have a leg up on other people that are applying for the same job, just because there is a lack of diversity in the company. So you bring a valuable skill set.
That's absolutely right. So I guess just to kind of wrap this all up today, if someone listening wants to learn more about a career in finance, wealth management, really anything under the sun to do with finance, what would you recommend they do as first steps?
Well, I think that, and we're talking, say, to primarily a Saskatchewan audience.
Sure.
Here.
Yeah.
Maybe some people from elsewhere, but I would check out the CFA Institute website. There's lots of information on diversity programs, on scholarships. So you can get information online about initiatives or why diversity matters to the CFA Institute. Secondly, Robin, I mean, we're in a COVID world right now, but we're trying to take steps as part of the CFA Society of Saskatchewan to educate and inform everyone, not just women, but this podcast, for example, hopefully will give you some information to help you make your career decisions. I know that before COVID came, Robin was looking at doing a women's networking event series, maybe every 3 to 4 months, where women professionals in Saskatchewan, primarily Saskatoon, get together for an evening, get a chance to network, get a chance to make some contacts, to ask questions. We're looking with students at possibly setting up mentoring programs. We participate at Edwards School of Business in their Take a Student to Eat, the TASTE initiatives. We go on campus. I mentor a lot of people. So again, we're trying to reach out and to tell people that CFA designation is much more than just chartered financial analyst. There's career opportunities for your different personalities, different interests. And by doing that, we hope that more people will be attracted to the profession. The flip side of that, though, is there has to be jobs. And so we need to work better, let's say, with companies to understand the value of hiring a CFA. What does a CFA designation bring to your company to help improve profitability and operational efficiency and all those goodies? So we just talked today about more women have control over investment decisions in the house. They live longer. A lot of women prefer to work with women advisors. That's the marketing or the selling opportunity to the companies. Now the companies should know this. They should be the ones saying, we want more women because that drives our profitability. And really at the end of the day, diversity is nice, but companies want to drive profitability. So you have to just show them, okay, if we hire X or Y person, that's going to drive our bottom line. And so again, that's what we need to demonstrate to the companies so they look at hiring more CFAs.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you'd add on that before we wind up?
I think you've covered everything, Jordan. I hope everyone enjoyed listening today, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jordan, myself, or the CFA board.
Yes, thank you very much, Robin. I greatly appreciate it. And I think Robin's an excellent example of how a lady can enter finance and have a very successful career. And I'm sure that her career will just continue to flourish over time. So
thanks, Jordan.
Thanks a lot, and you guys
care.
have a good day.